Welcome to our panel today. Max, congratulations, Caro, winning the race. Terrific performance. And Tom Sunrise and the previous winners, and then Jack off my boat, Ino Noir. So we managed second last time and second at the RORC this time, but not quite there on the full race. So fantastic to have you guys here with us today. The race, it was a classic. I think it was a classic Fastnet race. We've had a bit of pushback as to whether we should have started the race at the time we did, and some of the decisions made. I think following up from what we heard yesterday and what you're going to hear today, really glad that we pushed forward and started the race. I think it's the right answer, but we will be doing some review and making sure we do learn lessons from the race, and in particular the challenge of having had quite a couple of relatively light seasons and then going into quite a heavy start, which was part of the challenge for boats. And also, we'll talk and we'll see a little bit of the start, but last night the Class 2 and 3 boats were they're just as happy to be out there sailing and unhappy to be out there sailing in those conditions. And they also had some quite serious challenges getting to the finish. So the next, I think it was 2 more systems came through, and then that system really challenged them when they were going downwind, and the tide obviously went against at that point, and they had some pretty serious seas off of Capitol Hague. So definitely a big challenge. Really interesting race, and I think this is our opportunity to learn. So what we did a little bit of preparation, and I asked the guys to think a little bit, talk about what was the plan, and what some things about the key points in the race, and then what do you wish you had done. So this is going to kind of run through that, and then Louis got a tracker to follow up, so we can test what you say against what actually happened.
You can have the tracker at the same time. You're not going to
which figures first.
Yes. So Max, what was the plan?
I think as everyone, the plan was to survive the first, what was it, 12 to 14 hours, just to keep the asset in one piece, and then start the race or really push out after this one. That was our plan, at least. Yeah, to start, have a good start, and then make it through the first front, and then race after this.
And who was the navigator for you on the race?
The navigator is called Andy Green. He's from Australia. He has not sailed in Europe at all. Okay. So for him, but he's quite data-driven. So I think he arrived 10 days before the race. Really prepped himself, and he was lucky that we had Adrian Stead with us.
What was his role then?
Tactician or strategist, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's as good as a navigator as well. So.
And in some of the interviews, you talked a little bit about what did he bring to the boat? What was his? Cool.
Well, it's like I think he brings a lot of local knowledge apart from being like a world-class sailor. But with Caro, we always try to bring in some local people who know the area quite well. And this time, as we all know, Adrian, he's brilliant in England, and he knows the coast as a palm of his hands. It's really good.
Very good. And so, Tom, the plan?
Yeah, I think we're very much on the same page. I think we had in our minds 2 in the morning. 2 in the morning was when it was all going to get okay. Maybe not good, but okay. And we'd seen our friends in the previous race, run into problems in even just exiting the Solent. So our plan was get safely out of the Solent, work out what's going to happen at the front, and position well, sail conservatively, and hopefully come out of it in good shape.
Very good. You said sail conservatively. How many reefs did you put in?
Well, we decided not to take the 2 reef main with us, so 1.
Big reef?
It's quite a big reef. But I think we did put the J4 up. First time we'd ever put the J4 up. So
Okay.
Yeah, we were quite conservative. We were more conservative probably with our placement, over ledges and are picking our way out through bridge. You know, we tried to avoid what we thought was the worst of the sea state, and whilst kind of hedging towards the right for when the front came through. So,
okay.
Trigger.
Yeah.
You missed an opportunity there, Max. I thought you were going to say the plan was to win.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, likewise, a lot of obviously similar things. I think when we set out from the start, the picture was pretty clear, right? We knew we were going to sail through a cold front. We all know what cold fronts look like. You're going to see maximum breeze that we were expecting, yeah, maybe midnight. Be a little bit earlier than you guys, a little bit further west. And then, yeah, after the cold front, you see a bit of a right shift, so you want to be positioned for that. But predominantly, we knew that it was going to be tough. And more than anything, as always, it's the sea state that gets you rather than the wind. So like you were just talking about, Tom, how we position for the various tidal races along that coastline, which are significant, and the impact that they can have on the sea state. And I guess you don't always know what the, sorry. You don't always know what the sea state's going to do. Certainly with something like a front, like tack to tack, you don't always know until you get out there that, whether one tack's going to be significantly better than the other, how the sea state's going to have crossed up. I think we were quite fortunate in that the front kicked up quite quickly, and so there wasn't a lot of opportunity for the sea to get really crossed. Wasn't anything weird going on. So yeah, so it was positioning, like planning for positioning around those tidal races and the worst sea state, making sure that we got through them unscathed, and then making sure that we were set up on the boat to be able to deal with that, so moded correctly for the sea state and for the wind, but predominantly the sea state.
So should we go and have a look at the first bit up to Portland and see how that progressed in Class 0 then? So, but Max, you were pushing pretty hard at this point.
Yes. Well, as said, I'm the least experienced on board, so I just followed the recommendations. Or we also put the first bit into all the corners and tide races, and where we tried, or where we wanted to be in that in these conditions. And I have to say, Portland was horrible. To say it's like a washing machine. Yeah. So we tried to slow the boat down at one point to 6 knots. We had everyone off the rail, just in the cockpit, and. But you guys know it, but the sea state, for me, it's like not coming from England. It's like 3 meters deep waves and the boat's just falling off it. Yeah, so at this point and then we lost, I think, that was just before it got dark. So then there we lost the wand.
Yes.
That was also very interesting, sailing without the instruments in that night. Yeah, so it was a good experience, but... I'm happy that we got out of it in one piece.
So you were able to slow the boat down? Yeah.
Oh, well, we tried, but it's like, I think the speed was at 6 knots and speed over ground was 11.5 or something. So.
Oh, okay, so you had the whole coming underneath you. Very good. And then maybe to Jack then, what happened to us? Maybe you tell the story.
Yeah, so well, a couple of interesting things. I guess we came out the Solent quite well. We came off the start line, obviously sailing in the conditions that we had, which was slightly less breeze, I guess, across the line than we maybe would have expected. So we were sailing full main, but we were downsized on the jib, because for our boat, the jib change is much harder to do than a reef. So a bit of preemptive strategy. Yeah, and then like you just alluded to a minute ago, James, we were planning on giving a lot of space around Anvil. But on exit of the Hurst Narrows, we broke a batten, which kind of forced us into a long tack on port and into dropping the main to fix the batten, and therefore putting the trysail up. So we put the trysail up because we obviously couldn't have the main up while we fixed the batten. And very quickly, we kind of remoded the boat, and by chance, it became the right setup. So we ended up sailing... we ended up sailing a bit freer. We ended up sailing, keeping a nice angle of heel on with the trysail and a little bit fast, which is a really nice mode in those conditions, because depending on the direction of the waves, you don't necessarily fall off the waves so badly, right? But what that did do is it meant that it forced us into Anvil Point, just because of the time it took to make that change.
That's his excuse. Yeah.
That's my excuse, yeah. And then the next step, you were talking about the race off Portland. We know the race off Portland's bad, so we plotted a kind of virtual waypoint. Said we want to be X distance, I think it was 6 nautical miles. And we kind of made a bit of a gate off of Portland. And then beyond that, we're talking about crossing the cold front, right shift behind the cold front. So we want to do the long tack on port and stay as far to the right of the course as possible for crossing the front and having the right shift, keep to the right shift. But we didn't want to sacrifice being too close into Portland, where we knew the waves would be really short and really steep. Washing machine, as you described it. So that kind of dictated our strategy, and it worked really nicely.
Yeah, yeah. And Max, you had a few boats around you at this point.
Yes. Yes. We had a few boats like it was the Baton 56 Black Pearl, the Baton 65 Spirit of Lorena. I think Ran was there. Ran was even more aggressive, and I think that's exactly the point where they had to return. And in our debrief, looking back at it, I think we would have taken, at least I have that written down, that if we do it again, we will follow your route and stay 3 miles offshore.
Yeah, but so what was really interesting for me, other than the claims of trying to slow down, right, was that there were half a dozen boats there that were pushing like bloody hell, right, in those conditions, which is quite a thought when you go through it. So Tom wants to have a go. Maybe should we play your?
Yeah, go for it.
Play your first piece, and the other thing that's really interesting is. We've got 3 completely different... What was your sail setup?
We had a full main and a J4. Then we had, I think, at the needles, or just before we put in the first reef, and then we have been on the second reef there with the J4.
So we've got tri-sail J4.
2 reefs J4.
2 reefs J4 and...
1 reef J4.
So some difference in strategy.
Our only reef and a J4.
Yeah. You went to Max Reef.
We're slower as well.
So just same setup here.
Yeah.
But we have sunrise highlighted.
And we only have a pinhead main.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So just tell me. Do you want me? Just tell me to stop, Tom. If you want me to
Yeah.
stop.
Let's have a look at the anvil. And who's who here?
We're highlighted.
We're highlighted.
You want me to keep going?
Yeah. Let's
Just
keep
stop.
going.
We'll do, Tom.
Yeah, stop there. Going, I mean, as Max was alluding to, like we were, I think there were 100 boats in our fleet.
Yeah.
And
this is just your
and
top boats.
we were pretty much bow to bow with 20 boats or something at this point. You know, it was pretty tight, and this was quite difficult because we knew that there was stronger current inshore, and I've been over that ledge in bad weather before and didn't want to do it again. And we saw Dawn Treader and I think Cody, maybe one of the other ones. And it's not Cody. It was one of the other 1180s go inshore of us, right over the worst of the overfalls. Went in bow to bow, came out 1.5 miles ahead of them, and they'd been in better current. And one of them went back, and I think at this point we see Ran going the other way, folded in half. So we were quite smug about our decision making at that point. And then actually, if you hit play, Louis, we'll. Interestingly, the difference, in speeds between us in Class 1 and you in 0, by the time we're at Portland, we're in the last. We're kind of. It's just starting to get slack. So actually, sea state had calmed down significantly. This is where we saw oyster catcher going the other way, fold in half, and so we were still really nervous about sea state. But we risked. We were pretty confident that it was going to be fairly calm inshore. So we did come in quite close, and we're now. I'm not sure what time this actually would have been.
Sorry, I've got the time.
But we were starting to worry at this point about positioning for for the other side of the front. So I think we still probably had 4 hours to go or something.
I'd
But
say probably 8, 9 o'clock.
yeah, I think it was getting dark, and so at this point we were starting to think about our positioning into the next phase.
And would you have worried about the tide turning against you at that point? Are you caught in the wrong place? Or?
A little bit, and interestingly, so where we are on handicap, like 1.1, Portland in the Fastnet is normally, on a normal day, which this didn't feel like a very normal day, normally we would just make it or just be the tide turning against. So interestingly, in IRC 1, in a typical Fastnet start, this is normally where you start to see the front of the fleet separating from the back, which is why for me, if you're going to be in IRC 1, you want to be, towards the top half in terms of handicap, just because this is the point where you miss that gate. You risk missing that gate if you're not one of the faster boats. What was your comment, Louis, about the different boats, the strategies of the different groups?
Well, I think that there seems to be a lot more separation. That's later in the race, but I think quite interesting now. And I know this is something that Dave Fisher's brought up in the past when we did a Fastnet talk online. That the leading boats there actually went inside Portland, presumably for shelter and, well, I better not put words into your mouth. Well, if you look at the IRC 0 boats, the closest anybody went was very close to Portland, not inside. So maybe you discuss why.
So I think actually at this point we were hoping to lay the headland from a bit further out, and we didn't. So when you get closer in and the tide's kind of slack, we certainly never got into back eddy. You're kind of, okay, well, you hang on and see if you lift around it, right? And we didn't. And the sea state definitely felt like it was a little better in there for us. Actually, right south of Portland Bill itself, it was still pretty disturbed, but nowhere near as bad as it would normally be.
So, if that's good, why don't we move on to the next section? Maybe we'll pull up 0 again.
We'll go 0
and look at what happened in the next piece.
It was on this tack approaching, so we crossed the front, and then very, very quickly the breeze trended down and we went from trysail to full main before we then tacked in the western side of Line Bay, and that happened fast.
So no one would have put money on us having the trysail up for that long?
No. And we wouldn't have, I think the interesting thing is we wouldn't have put it up,
certainly
not that early, if we hadn't obviously broken the baton that we broke. But it forced us into this combination that actually then worked quite well for us. It felt like it on the boat, with the numbers that we were running on the boat, and then with hindsight, looking back, how we did through that phase, actually it was quite a good setup for us. I think because it allows you to sail in a different mode that worked for that sea state and for those conditions.
What we could see, so we followed in much further than we probably would have done, because you guys went in, and what we noticed was Warrior 1 tacked off a bit earlier.
Yeah, big difference of opinion there, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll keep playing.
Yep.
At what point does the front arrive for you guys? The front, just when you through the front?
Before we hit the western side of Line Bay.
At 7 a.m. there.
Yeah. So then after that we come around to start point.
Yeah.
Tide turns under us, so we're looking for the back eddy. Also understanding a backside of the front right shift, so we're staying right, plus playing the headland. Right, it all made sense. It was nice. I guess then the question that James is alluding to is that once we came round start point, we weren't necessarily sure how far to go in. Potentially less breeze in there.
How are we going to get the tack out? Getting the tack out.
Exactly. You so often you get sucked in and then you can't get out. Having the AIS is such a useful tool, right?
So then we keep going forward. We'll go around to Land's End, and maybe we'll have a little talk about the strategy there. But I think we got a little bit caught on Lizard. I remember we just had the most horrific, virtually no wind, and just the very steep chop of Lizard. And you can see, actually, at that point, we loss gauge on the 52s, and actually I think what you'll see is that as we went round Land's End, the Class 1s were actually, there was quite a lot of compression, and you guys have caught us up a fair bit.
I mean, Pinty is an interesting challenge for us to race under IRC because they're so different to us, you know, heavier, like quite a lot longer. I mean, they're 13 meters, you know, we're 11 or, you know, 12. I mean, so, you know, we're not really able to do much about them because they're so different. So we're more worried about the other 5 or so 1180s that are the same as us. And
so then coming to the Land's End, so I mean actually not that much separation between all the boats, and so strategy for the RSC, what were you setting up for, Max?
Well, I think it's everyone's. Like we knew that there was a trough line coming. It was not sure where it would be positioned. So it's like basically you try to sail to the shift.
Yeah.
And when you look at the tracker, I think that's quite interesting when you see Warrior 1 and us going a bit more right, and you guys maybe 1.5 hours behind. You're a bit more to the left, so you already had a different angle to it. Okay. So when you look at the tracker backwards, it's like this is quite. And then Warrior 1 did the tech first, so maybe we could have led that. But then coming to the rock, we did well, yeah.
Okay, actually let's do the comments. Let's go to Jack first, and then do it in order.
Yeah, it's nice when we all agree, isn't it? Yeah, so I think for me, from the start through to Land's End, was everything we expected. The cold front strategy around the headlands all played out as expected. Then from Land's End up through the RSC was the first bit where maybe we had some question marks. You know, pre-race, you're trying to understand what the weather's going to do, maybe a less alignment in the grid files about where the trough was going to be and when the trough was going to, how fast the trough was going to descend down the RSC. So that was kind of the first point of, okay, we've survived the cold front. First point of like real work in the nav seat of have we got some alignment now. We're starting to see a little bit more, start to try and like have a good idea of where you think the trough is. Satellite images, gribs, and then work out your strategy. It was obvious that we were going to need to sail fast to the trough, tack through it as the breeze went right through the north, and then we'd sail fast to the rock, which dictated our strategy around the TSS, which often is a big thing, the silliest TSSs. So that was easy. So then it was, okay, well, we come around the top of the eastern TSS. What angle do we sail towards the trough? So that's trying to understand where you think the trough is, and then you're basically relying on the computer to give you your best angle to sail to the trough. And so that's making sure that you've got good data on your boat, you've got good polars. And then, like, I guess running some different iterations to understand like how divergent your different strategies are. So that gave us an angle to sail towards the trough. It worked really well for us. I think what was interesting in hindsight, and especially looking at the tracker, is there was quite a lot of local activity, which there often is in the RSC. There were some clouds that made a big difference. It was quite shifty on our way up there. I don't know how it was for you guys. So then again, trying to kind of average out, keep sailing your fastest mode on the sails that you got up, keep adapting, but still sailing that general strategy of where you think is your best intersection with the trough to make your fastest route from Land's End to the Fastnet. Yeah.
Tom, you weren't, at this point, I think you weren't far behind us. When I looked on the tracker and saw a lot of boats in our rear view mirror, as it were.
Yeah.
But we did manage to just stick ahead.
I think the first half of the RSC. Can we go to IRC 1 just as we're, north of Land's End, just as we're around Land's End? I mean, certainly it seemed like an easy decision in terms of which way through the TSSs you were going to go. It was actually quite similar, I thought, big picture to the 21, where you're expecting, or certainly for us, you're going into the RSC and you're like, okay, well, because we had tide against us here and you probably didn't.
Yeah.
So it's okay, well, we're going to suck it up and go, we're going to turn right at Land's End because there's, we're expecting this huge righty. So you have some pain, and we went inside the big rock, the longships. That was exciting. And actually, at that point, again for us, we were very much in sight of all of our close competitors. I think Pintia and Dawn Treader and Kokodi were all very close to us.
Leading on IRC corrected there, do you think?
Maybe. Yeah, we probably were.
On the water, that group of 5.
Yes, so I think we'd have been certainly at one point here. We were front of our group, and we looked quite good in the overall. Like we'd weathered the first night well. So this is a really interesting. This next bit in IRC 1 was really interesting.
Let's
because,
follow that now.
We don't really go upwind particularly well, the sunrise. So we put the bow down and go fast towards the shift is our general strategy. So we had initially really hedged quite hard right, and Pintia, who are the sort of leftmost boat here, clearly just stayed on the breeze, and we kind of just come back together, all in exactly the same place. And so we, as Jack alluded to, saw a lot of local activity, and it was really quite light before the righty. We had a very stressful kind of hour where it was really soft, and we could see boats on AIS around us, certainly the English boats that were you're stressed because someone's going way faster than you or whatever. But we kind of stuck at it, and
Do you want to come out? Can we see a bit more of this? Or
we
Coming out right now.
we had again, I think this is one of the differences between 1 and 0. We had one more shift to come than you, so we were pretty confident that once we'd had that first righty, we wanted to do the same again and go bow down and push hard to the left. And once again, Pintia, who don't reach particularly well in medium breeze compared to the us wide double runner boats, we put the bow down. I think we had a bro, a J4, and a GS up and full main, or maybe a reef at this point. And we're doing like 20 knots. We were really reaching hard. And then that's the point we smash into the lefty and we tack and we do cross everyone. So we'd had one more shift to deal with than 0, which I actually thought we dealt with quite well.
Yeah.
I haven't gone and done the maths, but I suspect that we sailed a lot further than Pintia in the IRC.
A lot further than 0.
Oh yeah, loads further. But I think it's one of those cases where you have to do what's right for your boat. And for us, if we'd gone on the breeze in both directions and on both boards and just tried to go upwind, we'd have been smoked. So we have to put the bow down and go for the next shift. Is our only real move.
That's crucial learning for sail your own boat.
Tack through the trough. Timing of the tack was good. It was pretty obvious it was what was happening, boats around us. Like you said, Tom, it had actually been quite light beforehand, but expected the nature of the trough, expected it to happen very quickly, to tack and then to see a big increase. So for me, navigating, I communicated that with the guys, and you kind of can't communicate these things enough, especially when you know things are going to happen quickly. How we got the sails ready, etc., etc. And the dynamic on the boat changed so fast, which is I think what you're talking about, because you came up on deck, took the wheel, and immediately the boat was underwater.
Yeah. And it was what was the sail plan?
We changed sails quite a lot in the next 20 minutes. We started with full main, bro, I think it was low bro, J4 and GS. Maybe J3 and GS.
We had a big enough tube up.
Yeah.
So for me, this was the learning of having a new boat. So, and of course, everything happened at the same time. It was dark. Maybe it was a watch change. We had the wrong sails up because the wind came in, and we had too big a jib up, and there was a fishing boat and a cruise liner in our track as well. So that in the middle of nowhere, everything happened at the same time. You know, and then whoever was on nav couldn't hear. You know, it was just we just lost it a little bit, and we went up and down with the jib a couple of times, searching for the right sail combination for those winds. And that's the practice thing. We'd not sailed in those winds before. We didn't know. We didn't have a go-to, and we were uncertain about the sail plan we wanted to use. And for me, this is where, you know, my argument would be this is where we lost the race, because this was our opportunity. It's blowing 20 knots. We should be doing 22 knots towards the rock, and we were faffing around. And that's what made the difference. And that is the difference in a race like this. You know, I go back, every Fastnet race, I go, we lost the race there. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a learning opportunity. So this is what happened. Fair? I mean, you know, whether we lost it or we lost places if we didn't lose the race there.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the challenges around that situation, I think, actually for us, we were, as a boat, we were looking forward to it because we'd sailed upwind to this point, and we know that we are a reaching focused boat, pretty all-rounded boat, but we have some strengths in the reaching area, everything. Certainly looked in that direction. So, yeah, but I guess one of the challenges, you come through these big changes in the weather features, and you don't always know what it's going to look like out the other side. So it's one thing knowing your boat and knowing what sails you need when, and the other thing is then having a good understanding of what's going to happen out the other side, which you don't always know. So then it's having a good strategy to deal with that, and it's very easy to then become, I guess, a little bit flustered. So, I mean, we'd been sailing in a little bit less breeze. We tacked into, and suddenly we were doing 25 plus knots in the middle of the night, and we had two ships converging on us, and the breeze is still kind of settling down at the front. So we don't know exactly, you know, you put your sails up and you expect to point in the right direction. This is sailing with a full crew as well, right? And then you kind of adapt from there. And so we were then thrown by the fact that we had these extra factors, which was the traffic. You know, the whole boat's underwater, so you can't use the tablet on deck. So you've got a navigator downstairs, you've got a navigator on deck, trying to keep the boat upright. For sure, learning there, you know, as a crew, and how to deal with those situations where it becomes quite complex quite quickly.
Proper challenge, that's what it's all about.
And I think that's a function of obviously having less pressure around the rock, and also then the fact that the ridge was more advanced than we'd expected it to be. But so offshore racing, that's how the cards fall. So you have to adapt your strategy. And again, fortunately, we sail with very good people and good boats, good teams, so they kind of do that anyway. But that was a critical moment for us in the race. Certainly for me personally, it felt like it.
And there was a lot of discussion about whether to go west or...
Yeah, well, then if I then continue, you know, we then decide to redesign our strategy. We had basically an easterly option or a southerly option. So we could sail to the south, and we'd jibe to the south. So we're now sailing with, I think, an A2 up. And sail a very long way round, dive to the south, then jibe back in, but stay in better pressure. Or we could sail to the east, like almost towards the Scilly Isles, get lifted, and then come through this transition as the ridge overtakes us, end up on starboard out the other side of the transition. So sail much less distance, but sail through the transition. So the balance of strategy was usually if you don't know what's happening, if you have no alignment in the models, then my strategy is normally you want to sail the least distance, right? Stay closest to run line, reduce the risk because you don't know what's happening. Versus there's always risk associated with going through a transition because often it doesn't turn out exactly as you expected. So our balance of choices was risk by sailing more distance and being out on a limb when we don't know what's happening versus risk of sailing directly through a transition. We decided to sail the shortest distance. It took a lot of discussion. We also figured that if we, maybe that little bit of risk was a good thing against the boats in front. If we committed to the southerly option, then we committed to sailing that extra distance and committed to them just sailing away from us. And we didn't necessarily know what was happening in front of us either. And then from there to finish, we basically had no alignment on weather.
What we can see here is Balthazar and Avatar who stayed further west than us and went for the longer distance. that they had less choice in the strategy.
Yeah, it was clearer for the boats behind us. Yeah.
So the question is, what did you guys, Tom? Does that ring to what you saw? Because you were another little piece behind.
Let me get you up.
Yeah, get that up.
And I mean, I think it kind of comes back to the same, similar theme to, all you can do is sail your boat. And James, 2 years ago, and us 2 years ago, we were all very lucky in that we were in that pack that stayed in front of a ridge and sailed down a ridge. That's ultimately how we were successful 2 years ago. We were the slowest boat that made it in the ridge. And sometimes you're that boat, and there's an element of luck, and you have to deal with what's given to you. And I think here, the 52s stay in the pressure, and ultimately it wouldn't have mattered what you'd done at the RORC. Like you couldn't sail. You didn't have the same choices that they had, and sometimes that's just how it all comes together. And so actually, by the time we rounded, our choices looked way simpler, even than the boats behind you. And so the boat that's sailing off away from us is Ginkgo, which is much faster rated boat. I think they're like 50 points faster than us or something. And yeah, well, they're the boat we thought was an IRC 0 still at this point, I think. And so they're I think they're another ex-oyster catcher, I think.
Oh, it's.
I think it's a Tom Humphreys.
Yes, it's
Jason's dad.
Jacob's dad's
Jacob's
boat.
dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they were planing 40-something footer carbon boat, a big A2, sent it off into the distance. And at this point, so it's more interesting to look at us, the highlighted boat. No, even right now, there's us. There's us with our new for this race setup, pole back, big A2 pole back, in a little bit more breeze than it should have been up in. So we're doing like.
But look at the heading; it's nearly 90
Yeah.
degrees between.
Yeah, we're like.
You're 45, but you've got 90 degrees.
Yeah, so we felt pretty good about ourselves here, pointing straight at the mark, and still doing 20 knots at times. So. So we felt like we had fewer options here, and also this is another point where we're forced into sailing our own race, really, because this is the mode we've gone for. This is the IRC setup we've gone for this race. So we're going to pole back and sail as downwind as we can go, which is a new concept for us. So this was a fun learning experience, and it's about here that for us, the gribs start unraveling. So there was quite a lot of uncertainty about the ridge that was going to arrive, and we knew that from about this point, so like 50 miles to the Scillies, that the breeze was going to shut down by the time we got there. So I was looking at two models that I thought one was tracking a bit better than the other, and everything that I was seeing was saying that the breeze would shut down further north. I thought north bad, south good was where we were at. And actually, if you hit play, Louis, then and we're also now, we're quite far away from land, so we're just on SATCOM. So we're getting position reports every now and again. The other guys are out of AIS range, so we're kind of on our own. But there's Ginkgo again, but. So right now, at about this point, we make the decision to jibe and jibe south of the TSS. So at the point that we decided there, I've agonised over this because this is the point for us that we lost it against Pintia. But
where's Pintia now?
It's highlighted. Sunrise is highlighted.
Sunrise is highlighted. Pintia is one of the two. That's Ginkgo. Pintia is one of those two. I'm not entirely sure which one.
I think they're both northerly.
Yeah, and so at this point, we talked about this the other day, but when I try and go back and debrief these things afterwards, as a navigator, you're debriefing the decision making, and the only thing you can do is critique the decision you made at the time with the information that you had available to you at that moment. So at this moment, we've made the active decision. We're going to jibe and go south. There's better breeze south, and my assumption was that everybody else was going to do the same. And it was what, an hour since we jibed or something at this point. If you keep playing, when I get the next position report, which is about now, some expletives were muttered. And it's fine, because about this point, I'm like, oh, it's fine, we're going to pop out 5 miles ahead. And as we go along the south edge of that TSS, that number just gets smaller and smaller until you have to own up to the people on deck that, okay, you see that boat in the distance, like, that's Pintia just crossing us now. And so I think they had, at the worst point, about 5 miles on us, which we were not very happy about. And from about this point at the corner of the Scillies, we, pretty much from here to Alderney, we don't see more than 5-6 knots of breeze. So this point onwards for us was a real kind of sniggle fest of what's going to unfold. And I was chatting to Louis earlier, and he alluded to, Ginkgo at this point's not the faster boat's not that much in front of us, and a bit like the 52s for you, they just held on to a bit of the old pressure. Like, they were just, probably only for an hour or two, but they were just in front of that ridge. We were just doing everything we could to be moving and to be, and a lot of the time we're in, eye line of Pintia, knowing that they're right there, and you're doing the maths to know, okay, how much time we knew we owed them, in the region of 2 hours at the finish. So we tried to separate from the bit and go north, and at this point again we're balancing our sail plan between trying to work out what's faster between our code 0 and our A1.5 that's designed to be on the pole, but if you take it like new A15 for this race, it was designed to be on the pole, but if you took it to the Sprit, it was kind of like an A1. So we were kind of between. Yeah, we'd left the A3 at home, but the A3 was probably too heavy anyway. So should we have built and brought a proper A1 with us? And so we had a bit of dilemma there. And yeah, so I'd realised that we'd beaten Ginkgo anyway. So we separated from Pintia at Alderney, and in a kind of slightly coin tossy way, and it didn't work. So we got to Alderney probably with a little bit of tide with us, and by the time we were at Cap de la Hague, it was very much against us. But at Alderney, we gambled and went quite close in at Alderney, kind of hoping to be on the last of the good current. And actually, I think we probably found a bit of an eddy. And again, interestingly, I'd got all of those new. What's the French tidal grid called? The new one, barotropic. Yeah. So we'd got that, which did show some eddies in vague directions that all looked very pretty on the map, but were absolutely nothing like real life. Very high resolution swirls that just don't exist. And so we kind of gambled because it's the only thing you can do. So at that point, the decision is you've got this other boat that you need to beat by an hour, and we're 20 miles from the finish or something. Yeah. They've gone north. Okay, well we're gonna go south. And actually, we did eat into them quite well at right under the lighthouse at Cherbourg. We went really close in, and did make some gains on them. We ended up overtaking them, but just not enough. So,
can I ask a question? You won the Fastnet in 2021. You rightly got all that praise for 2 years that you were watching somebody beat you, and you all seemed in such a great mood.
Oh, we weren't. That's a that's a hideous facade. No. I mean, we were in a good mood because the first half of the race was horrible, and we were really excited about having a beer. But no, I mean, we gave it absolutely everything against Pintia from the sillies to where we eventually overtook them just after that, and they sailed the boat extraordinarily well, and Tom Nean, the owner of Sunrise, knows some of those guys a bit, and when someone beats you fair and square, what can you do? Go and say well done. Yeah.
One of the lessons I think from yesterday was, if there's some French boats around you through that piece, then follow them.
Yeah. They
know that area is so flipping.
Yeah. And actually, although I don't think they did particularly well at Cherbourg, at the Cap de la Hague. So yes, I agree, but definitely Alderney.
Great, thanks Tom. So Max, what's your memories of coming back from the RORC? And all we saw you was on this flipping elevator.
So I think we had the last weather briefing was Saturday morning at 9 o'clock or something, and then we saw that in the model it had that little bubble and spreading out just when we were to round the rock, and then our exit plan was always to drive south, and we did one that didn't feel so good, but we had a lot of these open 60s to the right of us, and that was like it looked like they had more pressure, so we did I think a 5-minute step down, got some pressure, got going. Then at some point we changed to the masthead 0 again, but we were too high, so we were like really turning left, and then decided to go back to the flying sail, and that turned out to be like a glamour then. So we had a glamour run to the sillies. Like,
what speeds?
That wasn't as speedy as like 15 to 17 or something, but then. Yeah, but then the really fast part was then from the Scillies to Alderney. That was just awesome sailing. So that was sitting between 18 and 22 knots over 6 to 7 hours. It was really good sailing. Triple headed. It's like on the 52 was really good.
Brilliant. And anything about coming into the finish?
Yeah. So first of all, it's like so then when we got going, I think we had issues with our SATCOM and all that. So and then someone on board said the Lucky and the 75 said finished. So it's like, so we also were not in good shape, and we were not feeling really like being on a winning streak. So that at least I was like. Right then, but what you do is just try to sail against Warrior 1 for the end of the race, and then a few hours later we saw that we could really give it a go, and then pushed hard through the night, and and then it got quite. I mean, I think they can have up to 9 knots current against you if you're in the wrong time there. So it's like we were all afraid, and as you know, no one, Edu doesn't know it, or no one knows it really what's happening. As you say, the grip fights are not really pretty, but not really telling the truth. So and it got lighter and lighter, and then I think just with daylight we were back on 18 knots and A15, so that was good. Yeah, we were lucky.
Good. So and Jack, what do you remember of the last part of the race?
Yeah, well, we'd kind of sailed this long VMG run all the way back up the channel, and again, not really having any alignment on the gribs and being in SATCOMs and having a huge amount of information, certainly not reliable information. We, like you were talking about earlier, Tom, I think general picture I had expected was bad in the north, good in the south, more pressure to the south. So we kind of like almost felt our way down that run, you know, always kind of driving south to find more pressure, and then, you know, not wanting to get too far out on a limb and coming back for a shift. And one of the big things that happened down there was actually boats sailing into us from behind. Yeah. And it was so pronounced, and I remember the Infinity 52 sailing down behind us, doing like 2-3 knots faster than us, and like 20 degrees lower than us on the same jibe. And it didn't get, we were just right on the front of it, and it just didn't get to us until they closed into like a mile or two. Balthazar. So that was a bit painful, but again, you know, we were just pushing with what we knew, again, trying to balance the risk. And then, yeah, the race was pretty kind to us relatively. Because we'd done this push south, we didn't really see an option to go north around the TSS. I think some of the Class 40s did that a bit in front of us. We had tide width through the race. Like you said, it can be 9 knots there. And you're right, you know, the information isn't great, but equally, if it's against you, there's just not a huge amount you can do about it. So that is the race course.
I think we had 4.5 knots against us, but it's nothing
Yeah.
we can do about it.
And if you're going fast, then it's okay, it's manageable. And certainly if you're sailing downwind, you know, tide against, and you get more apparent, you know. So yeah, so actually that last section of the race, very final section of the race was pretty simple. Yeah.
So we went north of Guernsey, close into Guernsey, south of Alderney.
Yep.
And then picked up the tide going north in the Alderney race.
Exactly.
And then it was quite light, I think, coming into the finish.
Yep, as it often is, yeah.
With a bunch of Class 40s, with the winning boats, which is amazing how well those boats perform.
They're fast. Some of them are really fast, yeah.
And that whole piece is really interesting. And you guys, after what you did to last year, you got to within 15 minutes of us at the finish this time as well. So, yeah, I was slightly worried you're going to do the same again. So that's some story, and unless anyone's got any other comments, maybe we'll open up if there's any questions. Any questions from anybody? Hopefully that's not been too esoteric for you all. We've enjoyed telling our story.
A couple of people mentioned conflicting grid files. Which grid files were you using? What were your wind models? What wind models did you focus?
Well, you kind of look at everything, right? So, you know, certainly your classic grids, you've got your GFS, not hugely useful maybe at that resolution. You're looking at your French models, you're looking at your European models, so your EC, your Arome, your Arpège, your Icon, some of the UK models. There's a new UKV model, super high resolution Met Office model, which you can't actually get yet in grid form. Okay, at the time of the Fastnet race, you couldn't get that model.
Yeah. So this was my dilemma. So you could, through Expedition you can get the UKV.
All right.
So the two for me that did a good job, but often, you know, didn't agree on the minutiae. Where the Arome, which we all, you know, love and rely very heavily on, but actually the UKV, which hasn't been available until this year in grid format, was very good and updates more regularly than the Arome. So actually, through the RHC, it did quite a good job, but you do see some odd features that are obviously just features of a model rather than reality. So I wouldn't use it for routing, but for a kind of high res picture of where a front is, just because it updates.
It's high res, but it runs more frequently. It also runs on more recent data, so it is good.
Yeah, I could talk about it for a while. But I'm not going to.
I know certainly Tim was saying last night that he felt that everything's late. It's been late. It'd been late for a few weeks before, as well in the previous races. Was that was?
Yeah, I think it was the reason why he didn't go north of the Land's West TSS, because there was a shift coming. It was critical about the shift, and he had so many experience of it being later than forecast. He just wasn't prepared to take the risk.
Yeah, which was interesting. So that's kind of watching trends, but there's a bit of luck in that as well.
It's quite a risk, isn't it? Yeah. It comes late and all that stuff.
Any more questions? Anything else you would like to? We covered everything. Ready to
I've got a question for Max, and I know Max, you've had some fantastic results over the years. You've also had some very painful ones as well. I know. What was the difference this time?
Oh, you mean it's like not hitting the Isle of Wight at the start, or? No, it's a true story. It's like when I started racing, my first race on these Ocean Classics was a Fastnet, and it lasted 25 minutes. And then, we were on the sandbank, and that was not a good experience. And luckily, a few years later, we did better. But I think it's like sailing is so complex, and you guys know that it's like sometimes you have to be the boat that is just making the cut into better wind and all that. And we all have been on one side, and luckily on the other side as well. So it's like some things you cannot control. Everything has to get in your favor at one point. Yeah.
And do you find that frustrating? Do you find that interesting? How do you find that?
It's hard to explain to someone being an owner of a 52 or like James on a 45, spending a lot of money for sleeping in wet dry bags, and it's like you cannot explain it. So it's like once you get bitten by the bug, you're in it, and then there's nothing better to me than sailing. Yeah. No, but we didn't. So no one told me, and so we try to. I think we're all the same. All the guys are the same. They try to really. Stay.
Years down before you found out.
I think a few red wines and a good sleep, and then the next morning, and that was it.
Nice, good. Any other questions? Any final comments? When do you think you won the race? Then, what was the key moment for you? Do you think?
Yeah, I think the bit when you look at the tracker and when you see all the boats, all the so-called competitive boats like. Which we're discussing now. I think we had a great run to the Scillies, and then from the Scillies to the end. That's really when we extended quite a bit, which was a surprise to us as well. At one point we had 35 miles to Warrior 1 or something. And they are really strong downwind. Yeah. But that was when you look at it at the tracker how it extends. I think that was a bit. And then we were lucky that you guys were holed up in light breeze. Yeah. So that's. That was our bit. Yeah.
Jack, what do you think?
I guess a lot of it's about expectation, isn't it? We kind of start a race, especially with the forecast that we had, and our expectations are all relatively managed because we all know we're just trying to get through the first night. And then certainly for us, we build expectation. The race is going well. Things happen. It's ocean racing. It's offshore racing. It's whatever it is. Things go well. Things go wrong. They change so quickly. We all get very good at bouncing around from that. So I think, for us, it would have been maybe actually easy to feel a little bit despondent as we approached the finish line because we thought we were doing quite well at one point. But the reality is we sailed a great race. We have a relatively new boat. We learnt a huge amount about it. We still finished 9th overall in IRC. And we've had a fantastic season, and you keep progressing and you keep, so it's expectation, it's perspective, it's all of those things. And, it's so great to be out there racing with all of you guys, and at the end of the day, it's just good fun, isn't it?
Well,
most of the time.
Any other comments from Tom? You've shared quite a bit.
No, I think that's good.
So great. Thank you for taking time. Thank you for listening. It's been a great experience to run through the race and share that with you. I would say that what you've seen here is 3 boats. Maybe we're talking about a few other boats that was our world. We had a different scene yesterday, and there were a good number of, it could be 10, 15 of these kind of groups who all performed incredibly well on the race and could have a similar story to tell. So that's some things that are fascinating about the Fastnet. We had, how many boats do we have on the start line?
Over 450, James.
Over 4, so
452.
So a lot of people out there, all with their own stories. And that's trivia, and that's all the stuff that's amazing about the race. As I said before, we will be doing a bit of a review of some learnings, and encourage people to input into that review, and then opportunity to share. The season is now over. We move on. We start the next season down to Valletta for the Middle Sea race, and into next year, and looking forward to some great racing again next year. So Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists as well. Thank you. Good stuff. Well done. Thanks, Max. Appreciate that. Good job.